Buried inside a random trade story about a video game movie is maybe the single most telling detail about where Keanu Reeves' BRZRKR project actually stands right now, and almost nobody has connected the two. Back in June, Jason Momoa quietly exited Sony's Helldivers adaptation that Fast and Furious veteran Justin Lin is directing, and that film already has a hard November 2027 release date locked in with a studio behind it. That same Justin Lin is also the director currently attached to steer Reeves' long-gestating BRZRKR adaptation. The passion project comic fans have been waiting 5 years to see hit a screen. When your director has a dated theatrical release on the calendar for somebody else's franchise and your own movie still does not even have a start date, that tells you almost everything about where the priority list actually sits at the moment. That is not a reason to give up on this thing though, because the underlying material is genuinely one of the wildest pitches in modern action cinema, and it explains why Netflix has stuck with it through 5 years of near silence. The hero, known only as B, is a half-human, half-god warrior who has been alive and fighting for 80,000 years. He watched entire empires rise and vanish before recorded history even got organized. He fought through both world wars as an anonymous grunt in the mud. He has been killed more times than anybody could possibly count, and every time his body rebuilds itself and shoves him back into the next conflict whether he wants to go or not. Basically, take John Wick's lethal skill set, weld it to Wolverine's healing factor, and stretch the whole thing across every era of human history, and that is the elevator pitch for BRZRKR, a title spelled without a single vowel that everybody just pronounces BRZRKR out loud anyway. It is worth pausing on why this even matters to Reeves' career at this exact moment. John Wick ended in about as final a way as an action franchise has ever killed off its lead, and that left Reeves without a signature vehicle for the first time in over a decade. He is still attached to a pile of Wick-adjacent projects, including the franchise's first video game, and a fifth Wick film remains likely eventually given the money on the table, but none of that hands him a new character of his own the way BRZRKR would. A Matrix return looks like a long shot based on how Reeves has talked about it publicly. Speed 3 has been floated too, but that is a completely different genre. BRZRKR is the one project sitting right there, created and co-written by Reeves himself, that could actually become his next defining franchise instead of just another paycheck tied to a role he already played. Mattson Tomlin picked up the screenplay job in October 2021, and his resume makes that hire look smart rather than random. He co-wrote The Batman Part 2 with Matt Reeves, created Terminator Zero for Netflix, he delivered a completed draft by late 2022, then things went quiet for a long time while he got buried under other jobs. He resurfaced at San Diego Comic-Con in 2024 to confirm a brand new draft had just been turned in, and revealed on top of that he would be showrunning the anime spin-off as well, which suggests Netflix wants one single creative voice steering the entire universe rather than splitting film and animation between separate rooms. Justin Lin's attachment, confirmed by The Hollywood Reporter in March 2025, was the real signal that things were finally moving. He signed on to direct and produce through his own Perfect Storm banner, joining Boom's Stephen Christie and Ross Ritchie, Stephen Hamill of Company Films, and executive producer Adam Yolen. Reducing Lin to just the Fast and Furious guy undersells him badly. Even inside that franchise's later, increasingly ridiculous entries, he consistently kept emotional stakes and character relationships legible underneath enormous chaotic action, which is precisely the skill this material needs so it does not collapse into empty spectacle. He also directed Star Trek Beyond and cut his teeth on episodes of True Detective, which brings us back to that Helldivers detail from the opening, because Lin's plate right now is genuinely stacked in a way that deserves more attention than it gets in most coverage of this story. Lin is also still attached to direct Sony's long-gestating live-action One Punch Man movie, a project he signed on to back in 2022 that has been through multiple screenwriters, most recently Rick and Morty co-creator Dan Harmon. He was briefly attached to an Amazon's crime thriller called Steak Horse 2 before dropping off that one, seemingly to make room elsewhere. Trade coverage of the Helldivers announcement openly noted that his BRZRKR commitment leaves a real question mark over which of his projects he tackles next. A director juggling 4 separate franchises at once is not unusual in modern Hollywood, but it does mean BRZRKR is competing for calendar space against a movie that already has a dated theatrical release locked in, and that context matters more than most headlines about the project let on. The most recent real update came months later, when Lin sat down with Screen Rant while promoting Last Days during its wider theatrical release and gave a genuinely upbeat status check on where BRZRKR stands. He framed the collaboration with Reeves and Tomlin as a real team effort, said he felt fortunate to even be invited into what he called Keanu's own creation, and stressed wanting to honor the comic's spirit while figuring out the right way to translate it into live action. He stopped short of naming any production start date, so right now there is no confirmed shoot and no official release window. Combined Combine that with everything else on his plate and a 2026 release was already off the table. A 2027 debut now looks genuinely unlikely given Helldivers already occupies that same calendar year with a locked date, and 2028 is probably the more realistic earliest target if production finally gets moving soon. Before Lin ever entered the picture, there was actually a different rumor circulating that Reeves might direct the movie himself and personally choreograph the fights with his own stunt team. Comic co-creator Matt Kint has said in interviews he genuinely thinks Reeves would make the ideal choice to sit in the director's chair as well as star. That idea got quietly superseded the moment Lin's deal was confirmed in March 2025, though Reeves stays deeply hands-on as a producer, so his fingerprints are all over this regardless of who calls action on set. Reeves has a decades-long relationship with John Wick director Chad Stahelski, going all the way back to his stunt double work on The Matrix, and reports have floated for a while that the two discussed translating B's combat onto screen during the press tour for John Wick Chapter 4. Stack everything up, and the honest read is that Netflix is quietly building an anthology franchise disguised as a single origin movie. The modern-day Black Ops storyline works as the anchor point, establishing who B is and what his curse actually costs him. But once audiences understand that foundation, the comics have already proven you can drop him into any era and any genre and it still works. Whether that is a Western, a Mongol Empire, or even a Bronze Age myth about something new being born out of his own flesh. The single biggest risk, and pretty much every outlet covering this seems to agree, is Netflix getting nervous about the rating and sanding down the violence to chase a broader audience once real money is on the line. That would gut the entire point of the character, since in this story the brutality is never decoration. It is the actual argument the story makes about what endless survival does to a person's soul. The other honest risk is that Reeves has become so tied to the John Wick persona at this point that BRZRKR could turn into a watered-down retread wearing a fantasy coat of paint instead of standing as its own thing. If the creative team holds on to that distinction, and between Lin, Tomlin, and Reeves acting as a genuinely hands-on producer, it looks like a strong one, this still has a real shot at becoming Reeves' next defining franchise, instead of just another action vehicle writing his name. 5 years of near silence, a director splitting time across 3 other major franchises, and no locked release window would normally add up to a red flag. But weigh that against a completed fresh script draft, an anime already deep into production, a best-selling novel, and a brand new comic that just expanded the mythology this spring, and BRZRKR looks less like a stalled passion project and more like a franchise Netflix is deliberately building out on every front before finally spending the money to put it on screen.